This is episode number 68. You're not going to want to miss this one with George Van Hook. Welcome to the PleinAir podcast from PleinAir magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting, often called plein air painting. For those who don't know, it's a French term, essentially meaning the open air or outdoors. The French say plein air, others say plein air, doesn't matter how you say it. What it is, it's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint, and this show's about the movement. The PleinAir podcast is brought to you by PleinAir Magazine's Publishers Invitational. It's a summer camp for artists in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York. It's one of America's best kept secrets, the Adirondacks. You'll come for a week of painting and leave with a collection of 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, however many you can get in a day, paintings of the most stunning scenery in America, and you will have made lots of new friends, painted some incredible paintings, painted with some other great painters, had great memories, and all levels are invited, beginners to pros, and we all paint and hang out together. And you may be painting next to somebody famous, but it doesn't matter because we're all equals at this event, and there's no workshops, and it's no invitation required. Anybody can come. All the meals and rooms are provided. It's on the campus of a college, and all you got to do every day is roll out of bed, paint, hang out at night, we sing, we play music, we do portraits, we just have a great time. It's like paint camp, like I said, and it's a really, really great time. It's in the Adirondack Mountains, so you can learn more at publishersinvitational.com. Well, it's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends on social or email, Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat, whatever you want to do. And I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes and also give comments or a rating. We appreciate it. If you have feedback, email me, Eric, at pleinairmagazine.com. The interview is brought to you by the Plein Air Convention, which is going to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico, this coming April. Man, it's going to be a big one. We got a lot of instructors. We got a lot of people coming. Last year we had close to 1,000. We're going to beat that this year. And it seems like a lot, but it's kind of like going home. You know, it's like you finally found your tribe. We all go out painting every day together. We watch demonstrations and lectures, not lectures really, but talks on stage, painting on stage, some of the best painters in the world there to teach you. And then we have field painters who actually are faculty members who work with you while you're outdoors painting, and you can be at any level. You don't have to be intimidated. You can be a beginner. You can be experienced. We've got it all. Anyway, it's a week of about 70 top masters teaching and working with you. You can learn more about that at pleinairconvention.com. Let's get right to our interview with the amazing George Van Hook. George Van Hook in the East. You're near Albany, New York, aren't you, George?
We're in upstate New York. We're in Cambridge, a stunning 18th century village that's actually just about a mile from the Vermont border. So we sort of think of ourselves as New Englanders, but Albany is the closest airport. But that's a world away from us. We're a little more remote than that.
Welcome to the Plein Air podcast.
Thanks. It's a joy, a pleasure, and an honor to be here with you, Eric.
I was trying to think about where you and I first connected, and I remembered I was sitting in the registration room at the Adirondack Plein Air Publishers Invitational event that I do. I think it was the first year, and somebody brought in these big paintings, and I remember one of them was a beautiful girl sitting in a rocking chair or something. And I thought, well, that's odd. Somebody's bringing paintings that are not plein air paintings, and why are they bringing paintings? And then I don't know. You came in and you were picking them up because you were delivering them somewhere or something. I think that's the first I ever connected with you. Does that sound right to you?
That is right. I think it might have been the second one because I was so naive. I thought the first one, I thought, oh, well, I don't deserve to be there. And then I heard about what a fantastic experience it was. And the second time I jumped right in. And what I was doing, I was leaving from there to deliver work to a gallery that was up that way. And so rather than drive up, drive home, and drive up, I brought those paintings with me and I brought them in. And,
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and that is where we first met. And of course, you were well known, so I walked in, I saw your face, and it was, my God, there's Eric Rhodes. So that was I still remember that clearly.
And it's been downhill since then.
No. all I could say, you were surrounded by 3 charming young children then, and now you're surrounded by 3 charming adolescents.
That's right. Well, I make my kids work at the event because my dad made me work when I was a kid in his business because I want them to learn business, and so my kids are. You've gone many, many times, and so you've seen the kids. I think they were probably pretty young when they started out. We've been doing that event for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years probably, maybe longer. And so those kids are now teenagers, and they're working the event, and they roll their eyes when I ask them to do it, but they do it. They show up, which is cool. So,
and also they're charming. They have very good social skills.
Well,
and
thank you.
That doesn't come from looking at a screen. That comes from interacting with adults.
Oh, well, they are looking at screens, but that's...
I know that, but they also, they're out there. They're good kids.
So, I didn't intend to talk about this, but you raised the issue because you had this perception that you weren't good enough to come to this event, which was really open to anybody. What was going through your head? I mean, you're a great painter.
Well, I know that, but it was just, it was, I don't know, just, publisher's invitational. I thought, you had to be invited, and I didn't understand the parameters of it, and so, I thought, well, I won't stick my foot in that pond. But then, as soon as I talked to a few people from the first year, and they said, no, come up, then I think the day I saw the invitation for the next year, I immediately sent it in. So it was just not really knowing, and of course, it is the most. All of the events that you sponsor like that are the most open, rewarding. They have done so much to just expand the world of the plein air painter, of the artist, that I throw myself into all sorts of events now in the art world that I hadn't done 20 years ago. So, you've expanded the horizons for all of us with these.
So for the person who doesn't know, since I can tell people all day long, and they never believe me anyway, but. So the person, and again, you sound like a shill, and I apologize to everybody listening.
I understand.
But for the person that doesn't know, what's the magic of that event? Because you've come back 5 or 6 times at least.
Yes, and I think this is for your other events as well, and that is that I've been to the convention. As painters, we sort of grew up in the mystique of the isolated artist in their studio or something like that, and that's really not. That's a mid 20th century configuration. Artists in the 19th century before, they really did see each other, reciprocate with ideas and things, and when we get together, suddenly it's as if you're looking at 100 different mirrors. Everyone there is the same as you in so many ways. They want to paint. They are not afraid to go out and say, oh my God, that's beautiful. They're willing to grab lunch and go because they want to paint that. They're not constrained by all of the the typical hang-ups of I have to stop and be polite. And so it's all that, and it's just that everyone is passionate there, and there's not that many places where you can sort of walk down the street in America or probably anywhere else where you can walk down and be passionate, and so that frees us up to be passionate and not be embarrassed by it, and I think that's the best part of it. And then of course there's the absolute technical part of it. Suddenly you're with other pretty good painters, and you're seeing how just very specifically, okay, I know this person, I've seen their work in the magazines, how do they paint? And suddenly you're watching them knock out 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 paintings, and you feel like you know that person's work and how they do it. And so as a learning curve thing, it's extremely valuable. So, that is not a shill. That is a real appreciation of something that has expanded our art universe.
Well, I'll send you the check later.
Yeah, sure. No, and Eric, if somebody else was doing it, I'd say it about them.
Yeah, I know you would.
Just so happens that you're doing it.
And I appreciate it. I think one of the things that's magical about that event is that unlike the plein air convention where where you've been faculty and others have been faculty, and the faculty are kind of put up on this
Yes.
pedestal, if you will. Everybody at the Publishers Invitational events are equals, right? So
Absolutely.
somebody who's never painted in their life might set up next to C.W. Mundy or you or somebody else of that quality, and everybody's accepted, everybody feels comfortable, and we just all go painting every day. There's no workshop, there's no anything other than just kind of play. Painting,
exactly.
Sitting up at night, singing, playing music, doing portraits, whatever we want to do. And so, anyway, this was not intended to be about that. So
I know. It's like Eric, you don't have to worry about that yet. Your generosity is exponential. I know. We get talking about something, and of course, Eric Rhodes' names come up because he's involved. I understand.
Oh, stop! Tell me more. So you started this painting game when? How old were you? How did it all begin?
I am very fortunate. Again, Eric, I grew up in the Abington, Pennsylvania. Was the first district north of the city Philadelphia line. Philadelphia was a very artsy town in the 19th to 20th century. It was the sister city to Paris in the 1876, and so that's why the boulevards of Philadelphia, going out to the Art Museum, mirror the housing boulevards of Paris. We had, I came from that post-war baby boom. I was born in 1954. I'm the fourth of 6 children. All of our kids, all of my siblings, even though my parents were both scientists, were very involved in the arts. 4 of the 6 kids are professionally engaged in the arts. And quite honestly, Eric, we were painting, drawing, playing music, playing various instruments. My earliest recollection that's sort of become a story now is from when I'm 3 years old. By the time we were in junior high, my sister, who's a year older, 13 months older than I am, is a phenomenal artist. She actually went the route. She got her MFA and moved to Canada and taught at the Alberta College of Art for 25 years and is one of the premier ceramics curators in Canada. She just curated the New Zealand National Ceramics Exhibition because they're part of the Commonwealth. But Amy and I drew together for many, many years. We actually had our first exhibition together. I was in junior high. And then we had a very good, really from junior high school all the way up through high school, a very good integrated art program. Very large high school, Abington High School. We had 4,000 kids in the high school, so they could afford to have an art department. They could afford to have a variety of very good professors. And one very fortunate thing was in 7th grade, I had a wonderful teacher. A lot of them came from Tyler. Tyler's a great school. Mary White went to Tyler, the great watercolorist. And she sent me, she said, George, you're pretty good. You better stop screwing around. And she sent me to copying old masters. And that was in 7th grade. And somehow that really clicked. And so, we were painting portraits. We were going outside, my sister and I, we'd going outside and painting watercolor landscapes. And then basically from then on, it was just, okay, I'm going to paint. And that's what happened.
Well, didn't you go over to Europe or something on a copying trip? Because one of my most cherished possessions is a drawing that you did, a copy, I think it was Van Dyck.
Yes.
And you told me that you had been on this trek of, spending months or years copying. Tell me about that.
I was, again, very fortunate. In high school, in my junior and senior year of high school, I actually spent both summers. The first summer making films I worked with a film company as an actor. I worked making films in France, and the second summer we made films in England. And, of course, it meant I got to visit hundreds of museums. And my wife had gone to Middlebury. We grew up together, but she went to Middlebury and was a French major and then became a botanist. But we decided after college she was going to enroll at the University of Paris for a doctorate, and I would go over and paint. And she ended up coming back and doing graduate work here in the States, but I stayed on and lived just outside of Paris in a wonderful town called Poissy. And I actually had Ernest Messenier's studio there. They called him King of the Dwarves. Messenier was a Protestant, and so he wanted to live outside of Catholic Paris, and so he lived in Poissy, and that great painting of him with Napoleon reviewing the troops and the horses, running across the grassy fields. That was actually painted right there in Poissy, in the fields of this monastery where he had his studio.
So Messonnier was one of the first to discover how horses actually, how their hoofs actually work when they're painted.
Yes.
Because he did this painting, I don't remember the one, but it became famous, but it was, everybody in the beginning said it was wrong because everybody had traditionally painted the hoofs, all out,
yes,
in back and front, and he was the one who kind of made them alternate, and he got a lot of grief for doing that. But at his studio, I understood that he ran a horse over and over and over again so many times because he was making quick sketches that the horse died.
Oh, my. Okay. I was wondering, too, someone would know this, the Muybridge photographs, of humans walking. He also did some of horses walking, but I think they came after his paintings. They might have validated what Messonnier just did with all of his drawings.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was there, and I traveled down. I mean, oh God, it was wonderful, Eric. And then what happened was I was great friends with all the people there, and Madame Carmouche was the head of the atelier there in Poissy, and she got me permission to go into the Cabinet de Dessin, which is the 100,000 drawing collection at the Louvre, which it's very difficult to get permission to go in there, and here I was a little 24-year-old kid, and I went in, and I'm looking at all the drawings, and normally you look at drawings, there's a bunch of 80-year-old scholars there, and I'm this kid, and there's this one other kid in there. He's a 24-year-old guy, too, and it turns out he was doing his doctorate on the drawings of Chassereau, and his name was Laurent, and we became great friends. And he was great friends with Monet's grandson, who taught at Lycée Henri IV there in Paris, and so we would go out to Giverny long before Meriwether Post bought it, and hang out at Giverny and paint. And then we went and we traveled. We just bombed. His girlfriend's family lived down near Carcassonne, so we went down to Carcassonne and painted there, and went all over France together. But it was wonderful. And then I went up and went through all the Low Countries and Holland, and copied all the Franz Halls and things. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And then eventually I came back. But we've gone over quite a few times since and taken the kids and things. So Europe is a vast treasure trove of just visual experience. And so I've been very, very fortunate to be able to avail myself of it.
So package that together now for somebody who's learning or trying to get better at art. Put that in a nice little package and tell them what that should look like or could look like in their life.
Sure. Most American museums allow copying as well, and it doesn't even have to be a major museum. In fact, you behoove yourself. I actually did 2 copies of the Mona Lisa, standing about 4 feet away with no glass in front and not a person around. But that was 40 years ago. Contact a museum that's in your area. They'll probably allow you to copy. Put together a very clear packet of your tools and materials. Go in, bring a drop cloth, find a painting that you can relate to. I think it's very valuable to do figurative work because that's sort of the mainstay of Western art. And then you set up and you just bring in a canvas or a panel. They need to be 10% difference in size, obviously, but that's fine. You don't have to copy the whole painting. I found it most valuable actually to copy just sections of the paintings, and then. And what that allows you to do is not only do you have the form decided for you, and so those decisions, as opposed to working, say, from the live model, those decisions have been made, but also you can very closely, over a period of several hours or maybe days, you'll analyze how that artist actually applied their paint. And if you do that over a series of weeks or months or years even, and you copy a number of paintings, it'll really enhance all of your work. I know years after I got back from France, my great buddy Jim McVicker and I were in New York. My sister, one of my sisters lives in Manhattan, and they were off to Europe, and they said, come stay in our apartment. And so we stayed in their apartment in New York, and we went in and we copied at the Met every day. And, Jimmy and I still talk about the Met. The Met is very open to people copying. And if you can't set up with paints, then I strongly advise bring a high-quality paper, good materials for drawing, and do drawing copies, because even then you'll learn the form, and just by spending that amount of time looking at a masterpiece, you will absorb it far better than just sort of walking through. You will become one with it. Yeah.
George, there's some person who's listening to this right now who's saying, George, but this is the Plein Air podcast. Translate why figurative work is important to a plein air painter. Translate that for us.
That's a very good point. But it is that 2 things, 10 things really, that the figure is the basis for Western art since the Renaissance. The great landscape painters, say from the mid-19th century forward, all understood drawing and painting the figure. Once you've done that, then you come out and learning the form. John Carlson, in his wonderful book on painting the landscape, goes back to those same basic principles of the cone, the cube, and the column, and those are the same principles for figurative work. So what you're learning when you're copying, and of course you can always go in and copy, a wonderful landscape, a Roysdale, or anything like that. But what you're doing when you're copying figurative work is you're going to the most fundamental of Western art, and everything will grow out from there. Also, most of the great painters, you think of Sargent. Was Sargent, a landscape painter, a portrait painter? Was Zorn, And so once you understand form and color and all of that, it translates directly across to the plein air experience. Kwang Ho's, that stunning painting he did, sort of a la Zorn, of, I posted it recently, of the woman from the back, in the nude, in a glade with sunlight dappling. I mean, is that a landscape? Is that a figure piece? So that's what I would tell a beginning student.
Well, and typically when you look at the work of beginners, the one thing that's missing, other than values, is form. Yes.
And so if you can learn to see form, because then really for myself, and of course I paint both in the studio from the figure, and I paint still lifes, and I paint the landscape. With all of them, Richard Schmidt talks about this all the time. You're seeing shapes. And so, you'll see the shape in the human head, and then you'll go outside and you'll see the shape in the tree and the cast shadow. The difference between the conceptual realization of the two of them is very slim. You look at the head in the light, the way the light casts and makes the form, and then you go outside and you'll see, typical painting of mine will be trees with a cast shadow falling across a barn. It's the same thing. It's form and it's light, and it's the way that the light releases the form. And that's what the plein air painter really wants to understand.
How long have you been doing plein air painting, and when did that begin for you?
Well, I know I still have paintings from 4th grade. We had a west-facing backyard, and so we grew up again in Mid-Atlantic, and so there were beautiful sunsets. And again, my sister and I, we used to go out, every evening in the summer, and we would be painting our little Turner-esque watercolors of the western sky. But then, certainly by high school, I was outside painting a lot, and it's really been nonstop ever since. I went out to California, and there it was plein air 365 days a year. It was spectacular.
So what are your feelings about this movement today? Because there's a lot more people painting today than there ever have been in plein air. What do you have? Pros, cons, thoughts, issues?
No issues at all. I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. More is better. More the merrier. Sure. I mean, people are saying, people will criticize. They're saying, oh, well, they're not good enough. They shouldn't be. But that's exactly sort of what you said to me when I was hesitant about coming to the plein air, in the Adirondacks. No, forget about, are you, a painter? Are you a good painter? But are you a human being? If you're a human being, you want to express yourself, hopefully. And that is what I love about it the most, is that, I go to a lot of the plein air events and paint, and I'm actually teaching a lot of workshops now, and what I'm finding is that these people are coming out, and they want to just experience being a human, the human condition, and painting allows you to feel that, the human condition. And so, and then also, when I went to art, when I was, going to college, you couldn't. It was anathema to try to be a realist painter, to paint outside. It was terrible. Now I look at these young kids, going to college and coming out and under 30, and they're just painting like. Of course, there's no hang-ups with this. There's no problem painting like this, and I think that is wonderful because it's probably going to take a whole nother generation of people working in that complete comfort level of, yes, this is a good thing and the right thing to do for us to really rise to that next level of, the great painting. I mean, I know my peers, we all look and we think, geez, look at what Zorn, Sorolla, Sargent, name the top 10,000 painters of that period. Look at what they accomplished. And I always say, yes, but that was a whole social movement. We shut so much of that down. I genuinely believe that this plein air experience is going to open that back up, and we will see in another generation truly magnificent painters. And that's what that's what I want to see.
Well, I got to admit, we're seeing truly magnificent painters now. The quality level that we're seeing, there are painters, landscape painters who are every bit as good as any landscape painter that ever existed, alive today and painting and active on the plein air circuit. There's also a tremendous amount of young people who are catching on and getting into it. It kind of started out as a little bit of a baby boomer movement, but that's changing rapidly. Right. And we're finding now, after 158,000 people have listened to the Plein Air podcast, we're finding that a lot of new people are discovering it through keyword searches and, what is this thing, plein air? And boom, next thing you know, they're showing up at the convention and saying, teach me, show me. And these people are absorbing fast, and they're really getting into the movement a lot, which is, of course, a fabulous thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely on the mark there, Eric. I think that you're right. It was a baby boomer thing, and we kind of look around. It was a baby boomer thing. Okay, this is cool. And then you're right. Suddenly, all these young people came out of the woodwork, and they want to paint. And yeah, that is spectacular. They want to. They're not going to be denied. They're not going to be told, go and throw this paint on the wall. If it sticks, it's art. No, they are not going to be denied. And so, yeah, I think I'm looking forward to sticking around for the next little while and seeing what happens.
Oh, hopefully a long while. Well, I think that's what's really interesting now is that, I'm not sure exactly how to articulate this, but back in the day, when modernism kind of took hold of everything, it became very uncool to be a realist painter or a naturalist. And now a lot of the kids that are in their 20s and 30s and maybe even early 40s now, we're starting to see these people look at what their parents loved or what their grandparents loved as, really old school, so that hip modern thing that everybody was into is now looked upon by many of the younger people as this is not where things are going, and now they're returning to their form of the classics.
Absolutely.
It may be classics with modern sensibilities, but it's still their form of the classics.
Frankenthaler is passé, yes. And also, I love that the younger painters are bringing a whole new sort of edge to, representational painting. I mean, Danny Grigio from San Diego, he's a young artist, and I just love him. There's a couple of young guys from Florida, and Kyle Buckley and Allison Menke. I mean, I just judged a show where a bunch of these young artists were in. Doug Clark, and they were representational painters, and they were just different than the way I do it. And it was like, yes, this is so cool because they're coming out of the same background, but they're young and they're hip, and they've got it. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
And think about what this is going to look like in the future. With all these great painters breeding other great painters, and it's really important to me because we've really pushed hard to try to keep this movement, growing and moving in a positive direction, and kind of looking at the naysayers and saying, look, let's accept everybody. Let's be, this is a family. Let's embrace and encourage everybody, and imagine what this is going to look like in 30, 50, 40, 100 years, and if we can keep this thing moving. I mean, we're estimating now there's 200,000 people plein air painting in the world. maybe in America, and we've got some stats that pretty much back that up. Now, maybe they're not going out every day like you are, or I wish I were, but
right.
they're going out and they're trying it, and we're seeing more studio painters who are saying, "Hey, I keep hearing about this plein air thing. I got to get out and try it." So they're showing up at the convention, and they're exposed to all these people, and boom, they're out there now, which is really, really refreshing.
Really good. The one thing I don't know if we'll ever cross this bridge, Eric, is that the Salmagundi is now really back on track. But will places like the Whitney, will places like the Met, the American museum hierarchy, will they ever let us in, or will there? Is that just a bridge too far? I mean, I feel bad. I feel like they have sort of drawn up the drawbridge, gone into their castle and drawn up the drawbridge, and are just terrified of what's happening out on the streets.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No. So I think you have to reverse the question and ask yourself: would the National Portrait Gallery allow in, something that was just totally crazed abstract? Yeah, and
right.
I mean, they might, but I think there will be new institutions. One of my goals is to build the Museum of Plein Air Painting. Because I think it needs it requires its own plein air. I just need somebody to throw a few $1 million and some property at it in a major city, and so that we can document this movement, because it's the largest art movement in the history of art. Nothing like this has ever occurred, and it's significant, and yet it is totally ignored by the museum scene for the most part. And keep in mind that these people have become exactly what modern art was designed to overcome.
Exactly. Yes. A moribund aristocracy of complete control. Yes. So, yes, I agree. Yeah. Well, maybe Berkshire Hathaway will throw a few shares our way, and we can.
Yeah, Warren. We need to get Warren painting.
Get Warren painting. I know.
Yeah.
I do. Yes.
I guarantee you, if Warren Buffett starts painting, everybody will start painting.
Yes. But
it's surprising to me how many people are painting now. How many celebrities are painting? A lot of people that don't want to be known, but I'm hearing from that are plein air painting, and it's pretty cool.
I mean, Tony Bennett, of course, has been our idol for years. And then, of course, when I was a kid, my mom was just enamored with, we lived not far from where Eisenhower's, home was in Gettysburg, and he and Churchill used to paint together quite a bit. And so I still have a couple catalogs from the early exhibitions of Winston Churchill and Eisenhower's paintings.
Fabulous. Well, there's several.
They were there, yeah.
Yeah, Kennedy painted. George Bush II painted, and Jackie Kennedy painted. So it's kind of nice. I just went to a show of Winston Churchill paintings, plein air pieces in Palm Beach in December when we were down there for Christmas, and it was fabulous. I mean, I never really thought he was like the world's greatest painter, but the fact that he was running a country and doing this to get his mind out of all to get some relaxation and some challenge and some focus in a different area, which is fabulous. So,
and of course, he grew up in the Victorian era, so he actually had sort of same as Queen Victoria painted little wonderful watercolors. I mean, he actually had some very good training as a young man, and there's a beautiful Sergeant charcoal of him as a young man, probably before he went off to the Boer War. So you just think, okay, he was clearly aristocratic. He hung out with probably the Bloomsbury Group and stuff like that, and so of course he was a sophisticated guy.
Well, the UK bred what they called Sunday painters. Sunday painters were, it was kind of a hot thing. Everybody would go out with their little watercolor sets, and they would just paint in the parks on a Sunday. And when they would go on trips, they would paint. I have a very good friend, Pat Welsh, who is now in her 80s, maybe late 80s, who grew up in England. And that was the thing. She told me, we were all given a watercolor set, and when we went on trips, we were encouraged to paint, very much like what your mother did with you.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we need to bring some of that back, and it's not about breeding professionals. I mean, if people want to become professionals, more power to them. But it's about helping people see the world through the eyes of an artist, which is completely different than the way we used to see it.
Right. And also, people used to play musical instruments much more in the home. I mean, families grew up and everyone played an instrument. They say that, in Germany in the 19th century, you couldn't walk down the street without hearing piano coming out of every door. I think we've given a lot of that. Oh no, you can do it. We've given that up. We've allocated that all to the screen and the disc and things like that. And
well, there's becoming a backlash though. There's a book out about analog, and this book basically talks about how the Generation Z, the late Generation X, are now starting to embrace things that are analog, right? Well, one of the hot things right now is vinyl. The things that 33 1/3 albums that we grew up with now are, for the first time in a long time, album sales have exceeded $1 billion because kids are coming back to that and they're getting turntables and speakers because they can tell a difference in the audio from their MP3s, and plus it's a tactile experience. It's different. Yeah. And the same thing is starting to happen again now, moving back towards books and so on. So maybe there's some hope that, I think, people are going to say to themselves, gee, I'm looking at my screens all the time. Maybe I need to get into something else just for a little break from time to time. Who knows? I mean, I don't want to sound like one of those old guys that's back in the old days.
Back in my day, I know. That's the thing. We're all terrified to sound like that. But Eric, not only is there hope, but again, send me the check. But thanks to you, there is now the venue, so that they have their hope can now be expressed through a venue. So hooray, hooray, hooray! There's an opportunity for them to go out and jump in the pond because the pond has been built.
Well, we're trying to do is give them things to do. Give them experiences, give them the world's best educators, the people who are able to teach it, able to show you people. And by the way, we try, as we try very carefully to eliminate the arrogance factor. We try not to bring in people who are big egos or high arrogance. We're looking for people who truly want to help people. And right. The best thing possible, some lady came up to me at the convention last year, kind of at the dance on the last day, and she said, I think I've died and gone to heaven. She said, I was sitting there painting, and so-and-so walked up to me. I think she said it was Matt Smith walked up to me. She said, I was even afraid to talk to him because he's so famous, and he walked up to me and said, hey, can I help you at all? And she said, yeah, sure. And then he gave me some tips, and then he worked with me on my painting for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he went on. And then she said, about an hour or half an hour later, somebody else came up to her and offered the same thing. She said, like, how could I ever get this? This is like, I can't get this at home.
Right. That's great. She said, don't touch that part. That's where Matt painted. You paint over here.
That's right.
Matt Smith is a hero of mine. Yes.
Well, you're a hero of mine. So what are you doing? You said you're doing a lot of plein air events. Are you kind of on the circuit these days?
No, not so much on the circuit, but this year I am going back down to Florida. Leaving in a couple of weeks. My brother's in Gainesville, and so he just retired from the university there. You'll love this. His first doctorate was on 17th century Italian critical aesthetic theory, which is basically the invention of the Renaissance, and his second was in rare books at the University of Chicago. And so he basically, translated 1,000 pages of Renaissance literature and helped understand how was the Renaissance formed. And he has actually said to me he'd like to condense it down to a sort of an hour and a half lecture. And I said to him, I said, Johnny, he's the one who went to Columbia. I said, Johnny, you should do that, and I will get you on this plein air circuit because people would love to hear what you have to say.
We'll do a documentary on it. But what we ought to do is get him to document what's happening in this plein air movement right now, because
I will talk with him then, because I go down because he's in Gainesville and he just retired, and then I'll be doing the Lighthouse again, the plein air event there.
Yeah, that's a nice event.
It's a wonderful event, and they're going to have me teach again. And then in West Palm, there's the Armory Center, and they wanted me to teach. And then Ted Matz has his school there, and I'm going to teach. And then I'll flip over. These are all just friends of yours. So I'll flip over, and I'll teach with Vlad there in Sarasota. And then I'll come up, and I'll be with Paul Ladnier there in Jacksonville. And then I'll come back up to Cambridge.
So
and then,
I got my first art lesson at the Armory Art Center in West Palm Beach.
Oh.
And the fellow who taught me is now gone. There's a great teacher there by the name of Hugh O'Neill. He does plein air painting, and he's fabulous. Probably many others great as well. So anyway, so tell me a little bit about a couple of core essentials that you're always working with students on, because we have a lot of people who are listening to this who are beginning painters or trying to develop themselves to the next level. Where are the things that you can help them the most? What are the things that you think people need to be thinking about and concentrating on in their quest to be better painters?
And this is okay. So that's a very good question, Eric, because that's what, if you're really serious about teaching your workshops, that's what you want to do. You want to make them better. And I approach him and we talk about composition, and we talk about my materials, we talk about all these things, and we talk about shape, and we talk about color and temperature. But I have found, and I know this is going to sound almost like, come on, but I have found that if I have them for 3 days, the biggest drawback for the beginning, not even the intermediate painters, if they take a little bit of paint and they sort of scrub it, and they take a little bit of paint and they sort of scrub it, they don't let the paint do the work. And you have to, as a painter, you look at Matt's work, or you look at, anybody, you look at almost anyone's work, Kwang's work, the paint is doing the work. And a beginner painter, or even an unsecure painter, is going to try to, scrub the paint into the right place. And so what I have found, I will tell them all the things about, composition and shapes and I'll do all that. But I really push them by the end of the third day to be painting. And I mean that. I mean putting the paint out, picking it up with your brush, and putting it on the canvas or the panel. And I tell them at the end of that, and I show them what they did the first day, and I show them what they did 3 days later, and I say to them, you might think you didn't improve a lot, but look at what you're doing now. Now you are painting.
So the rule that you're kind of talking about is lay down a brush stroke and leave it alone.
Yes, and make sure it's a real brush stroke. And then you'll get the paint better. But if you're never painting, then you'll never know what it means to paint better. And so that's what I would just, as you're working with any beginner painter, say, put out enough paint. Don't be afraid of it. Put out enough paint. Have enough brushes. And make sure the brushes are, a good size, a 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever. And then take a brush and put it down, okay? And then, yes, get the next brush and put it down. Try to put it in the right place, but don't sit there and scrub it. And that's the most important thing.
Beginners tend to not want to dip too much into their piles. So what are you doing to make sure that your brush stroke is not too thin, not too thick? Are you having them put some medium in it? Are you taking certain kinds of paint that come right out of the tube and make a great stroke? What's your process?
That is truly, that is just experience, Eric. That's like, how does, a golfer around the green, how is somebody able to lay that ball up 6 inches from the cup and somebody else, can't barely keep it on the green? That is touch, and that is really only gained from hours and hours of stick work. But still, I do find I really have people come and watch me. And so, and I know, I did a demo down there at the Bath PleinAir this last October, and some very good painters were there, Doug Clark and Kyle. And when I started out, they were like, what's this guy doing? Because it was just like big brushes. It was a demo. It was a 25-minute demo. And then, at the last minute, boom, 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 the last correct, last 3 brush strokes in the right place with the right value, and the right tone, and the painting came together. And they were like, oh, I get it. So, getting that finesse is only gotten through, hard work and many, many hours. But, if a student watches the teacher do it, or, watches someone else do it, they should be able to mimic it fairly well. And after you've mimicked it for a fairly long while, you will then ingrain it. And so, that's the same thing with copying. If you're copying so that you're mimicking it, but if you mimic it enough, you will ingrain it. And once it's ingrained, then you have liftoff. And so, that's what I try to do with the students. And also, of course, make sure that you limit their palette at the start, and even limit, the couple of brushes they're using and things. Limit, the complexity of what they're painting. But that's what I try to do in my workshops is try to get them to paint. And then I say, okay, the next workshop, you're going to take that you can paint and you're going to paint better. And, so that's what I try to do with them.
Okay. So I don't know if people have noticed in listening to you, but you're like the Energizer Bunny. You have more energy than anybody I've met. You're in great shape, and when you're in the Adirondacks, which is really funny, is that you go out and swim every morning, no matter how cold it is. And I think you swim once a day, twice a day?
Well, that who was it? Was it Vanderbilt that first settled there? And he said he wanted to find apparently the most beautiful lake in the world was in Austria, but the second most beautiful lake in the world is the one that Paul Smith is on. I mean, wait a second. If I'm going to have if I'm going to be staying literally on the banks of the second most beautiful lake in the world, yes, I will go swim twice a day. I mean, The Adirondack water is just so beautiful.
Well, it's so amazing to me. I mean, what you're from New York, but you know about the Adirondacks. Most people in the United States don't even know the Adirondacks exist because they've done a no marketing, a lousy job of it. And the only marketing that really ever took place was the Hudson River School painters came up and painted in the Adirondacks and in the Catskills, and those paintings went out, and everybody's like, wow, where is this? And they're like, eight hours a day. Of course, back then, it was wilderness. It's still wilderness.
Still wilderness.
The incredible scenery is beyond comprehension. I've been up there now for, I don't know, since 1989, and I can't get sick of it. I mean, every day there's a new place to paint, and I think one of the reasons people keep coming back to the Adirondack thing is because you can never run out of spots. I mean, a lot of us go back to the same places because they're different because of the light, but they're, these spectacular waterfalls. But anyway, I don't know how I got off on that, but it's.
Oh, we were just talking. You were actually trying to tell me that I have a lot of energy because I love to run, I love to swim, I love to bike. I mean, I love being alive, Eric.
Well, you really take care of yourself. You have special diets and all kinds of weird
stuff. I do try to take care because, again, one thing I think all of us painters who are serious realize is that, you can make art almost till the end of your life. And so even though many of the greater, Titian's greatest paintings were when he was almost 90. So you want to take care. I know there was this sort of, mid-20th century thing of the artist would drink himself and to death and flare out, and that was romantic. And, maybe that is for you, but, I like what my friend Martin Long said. It's not a race. Painting is like a marathon dance. It's the one who's standing at the end.
That's right.
I just want to make sure that, I stay in, good health, as do you. I mean, with your vegan diet and things, Eric, you stay in very good health because I want the next, years of my life to be, meaningful. And I want to be able to express what, the 45 years of experience till now have brought me. So that's the, and also,
you
it's
don't
a beautiful
world.
Want
to be able to, you want to be able to paint when you're, really, 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 really old, but you also want to be able to go outside. There's a fellow in California, I think his name was Ray Strong. He was in a wheelchair, but he was outdoors painting every day till till he was 100 years old. I think he died at 100 or 101. And he had somebody wheel him out, but he was out there painting because he wanted to be out there, and that's where I want to be, and I know that's where you want to be too.
Yes.
Well, George, this has been an absolute pleasure, an honor to have you on the podcast.
A joy for me.
For the people who want to reach out to you, find out about your workshop, what do they do? Go to georgevanhook.com?
Let me see. It's georgevanhookfineartist.com.
George
Fine Artist, ARTIST. Yes.
Okay.
George Van Hook, Fine Artist.
You've also got a video. What's that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. I have a wonderful video that you made through Streamline, and it's gosh, Eric, you'll have to catch the name for me. I should have one sitting in front of me. I'm in our video room. It's a plein air painting, painting the landscape in plein air. painting the landscape, and it really is it's a lovely video. And it was kind of charming. I can't remember the name of the fellow who filmed it,
Cameron.
but I took him to a beautiful farm nearby. Yes, and he said he had the most fun filming it because he took all these little vignettes of the farm life and things, and it really is just aesthetically, it's a really beautiful opening to the film, and I could tell he really cared about it. So it's painting the landscape in plein air.
Is that farm in Jeffersonville? Isn't up that way?
No, Jeffersonville is north of here. That farm is actually about 1.5 miles from my front door.
Oh, really? How convenient.
It's just outside. Yes,
right.
It's just outside of town. A beautiful 5 generations. They tell me the most. I still like to. We talk about things all the time. They told me that the best plowboys were from Ireland. A good Irish plowboy could plow 4 acres in a day. I mean,
Well, we need to preserve this lore. I think that to be able to do a painting and then write that on the back, about what you learned from the farmer, and so many of the places that we're painting have disappeared. Even things in our lifetimes that we've painted have disappeared, and now other things are bound to disappear at certain points. So it's really important to document these things. Well, George, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Eric.
I'm looking forward to seeing you, and thank you again for doing the Plein Air podcast.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks again to George Van Hook. He's a good friend and a great painter, amazing painter, actually. You should check out his work. I think he gave his website address in the podcast, but I think it's George Van Hook Fine Art. And also his art instruction video is at streamlineartvideo.com. It's fabulous, just fabulous. Today's podcast was sponsored by the Plein Air Convention. It's pleinairconvention.com. Also by Plein Air Magazine's Adirondack Publishers Invitational in June, a week of painting together with friends. It's really a lot of fun. Sign up at publishersinvitational.com. And you don't need an invitation for the invitational. How's that? All right. Anyway, also, if you haven't seen my new blog, you might want to check it out. It's where I talk about life and art and all kinds of other things. It's called Sunday Coffee. It comes every Sunday morning. I do it on the back porch when I'm having coffee and then send it out to you. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Well, the plein air movement is red hot, which may be why the Plein Air magazine is top in its game these days. We're loving it because we're outselling all the art magazines in the world at Barnes & Noble, and that's pretty cool. So drop by, pick one up, or get yourself a subscription at pleinairmagazine.com. This is always fun. I love doing this because I'm an old radio guy. What can I tell you? I like being on the radio. We'll see you next week, and until then, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. Remember, it's a great big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.